All right, we are live. Good morning, everyone. Lance Tarchioni here with you on Ask the Agronomist. Appreciate you joining. Sorry, we're making sure we're connected here. Hopefully, we don't have any connection issues this episode. We got a long list of things to go over here. This episode will be maybe a little lighter on agronomy and a little heavier on a few other things. We're very excited about our final season ending episode, which is coming up. Actually in 2 weeks and 1 day from today. So I'm going to tease you a little bit. I'm not going to tell you exactly who our special guest host will be for that episode quite yet, but we are going to move Ask the Agronomist to a Friday at 8 o'clock instead of Thursday at 7:30, which is our typical time to accommodate our special guest. And Adam and I will be hitting the road and headed to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And so that's a little bit of a hint as to who our special guest might be for that final season ending episode. And that's also the episode that we will draw out our prize winner for this year's Ask the Agronomist prize, which last year we gave away a few bags of corn, which you're used to seed companies giving away corn, so that's not anything terribly creative. This year, I think we've got a kind of a different special prize. It's like a fire pit thing, right, Adam?
Solo stove.
Solo stove.
Yeah.
So
Hot, new, trendy stove. You can hang out with your buddies around your corn.
So there, Adam said hot, new, and trendy. That would explain why Lance doesn't exactly know what it is we're giving away. But I did see a picture of it. It looks pretty cool. I think it'll have maybe an Asgrow DeKalb logo kind of etched into the side, stainless steel, kind of a cool looking thing. I mean, you're standing out there on your patio having a few frosty ones with your buddies. You can stand around this stove and keep yourselves warm. So that'll be the prize. And how do you enter to win the prize? So Jennifer Elliott very graciously is once again going to go through every single episode from season 2, so from this year. And if you chatted in a question, that gets you an entry. If you chatted in 10 questions, you get 10 entries. So a few of you that are kind of regular chat users are going to have multiple chances to win. And some of you will have maybe one chance to win. And a lot of times you see, somebody tries to win a raffle or something by buying up 200 tickets and they got 200 chances to win. And some guy that bought one ticket still wins. So asking lots of questions isn't going to guarantee you a win, but it does improve your odds. So we love our chat audience here, and we love the interaction with the chat audience. So kind of we started. This is the way we did it last year too. If you want a chance to win the prize, we're gonna kind of bribe you a little bit to ask some questions. So that's why we call it Ask the Agronomist. We want to interact with our live audience. I know most people watch this in the recorded form later, and maybe you enjoy other people's questions, but you don't ask your own questions. But we're always trying to find ways to get our live audience participation up. And so this is one of our gimmicks to do that would be the giveaway. So so that'll be on the 16th, which is a Friday. 2 weeks from tomorrow, live from Champaign. Technically, I think it's Urbana, but I get that confused. I lived there for several years, and I still can't quite tell you what's Urbana and what's Champaign, and why sometimes I always thought it was Champaign-Urbana, but oftentimes these days I hear Urbana-Champaign. So I'm not exactly sure, if somebody lost a bet there between the two towns, who gets to be first in the name. Alphabetically, Champaign would be before Urbana. But anyway, it seems like I hear it both ways, but you know where we're talking about. So we touched on our final season episode. The other thing that we want to make sure and talk about is we have, just because we want to get the maximum number of participants enrolled, and we had some really good yields this year, and we want to celebrate people who had really good yields this year. We're extending the enrollment deadline for our Yield Chaser contest through the end of December. So you've got all the way through Christmas, right up to New Year's Eve to get your submissions in. I think Adam is going to post in the chat the link that you can use to enroll and submit your data. So there's two ways you can enter. You can, and really, if you didn't already do the one way, then you're going to have to do the second way, because the first way you could use, a scale ticket or a weigh wagon, or do kind of a corn growers yield contest type of weight or something to enter. If you didn't do that during harvest, you obviously can't go back and do that now. But what you can go back and do now is draw a field region report of 10 acres or more. I think it's 10, right, Adam? Minimum 10 acres. And I'm going to demonstrate how to do that here on my iPad in a minute. We'll see how this works. But if you've got your yield data and climate, so that's the first thing you got to do. You got to have yield data and climate, and you can go in and generate this field region report of at least 10 acres, and you can use that as your submission to Yield Chasers. So you can create a PDF file, which you can upload to that link that Adam shared, and that's how you enter the yield contest. Now, we get lots of questions from people about, well, how do we know people aren't cheating? And how do we know if your yield monitor was calibrated? And what if my yield monitor was 10 bushels high or 10 bushels low, or what have you? So we're trying to make this fun. For things to be fun, typically they need to be simple and easy, and requiring some proof of elaborate calibration procedure is not fun or easy for anyone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to trust you, period. So don't screw with your yield monitor settings trying to win our yield contest. But we will accept that, and I'm going to try to do my little demo here. So I've got a field pulled up. So the first thing you're looking at here, that is a satellite image on this side from August 31st compared to a yield map on that side. Oops, hit a button there. Try to get rid of that. So I just illustrating the high degree of correlation between satellite imagery and yield maps. Now, you'll notice there's some data missing. So these holes in my yield data over here, this is from my farm. That's why it's messy. I have submitted that to climate support. That's been elevated to level 2. And I think what level 2 is, that's an even deeper black hole than level 1, and they are working on trying to salvage that data. So I've got on my Gen 2 2020 monitor in the combine, I've got full coverage. I've got all the data, but when I upload the data files, some of them are not uploading. So that's kind of monkeying with things a little bit. But anyway, I was just wanting to show that satellite imagery. So I'm going to get off a split screen here. I'm not a super user of climate, so bear with me. So I'm going to get to my yield map here. I'm going to blow my yield map up. So here's my yield map. You can see the north edge of this field. Unfortunately, where I'm missing a bunch of data is where my best corn was. So that's messing up my entry. I'm not allowed to win anyway, so that's okay. So we go into the menu over here. And if you click on this tab right here, that is the Harvest Report tab, you can create a field region report, which is the bottom tab there, if you can see that. So when you hit that tab, then it's going to give you an option to either create a polygon or draw freehand. I'm going to pick draw freehand. And then all you do is you just draw a box on there, and it's tabulating that right now. And then it tells you that in that 12.5 acre box I just drew, my 6270 averaged 289 bushel. So that could be, because it's over 10 acres, I could save that. So I create a PDF. So it's creating a PDF of that, and I could submit that PDF from that field region report, right there it is, to the link that Adam put in the chat. And that's all you got to do, plus give you give us your name and some personal information, but not too personal information, to enter into the Yield Chaser contest. And now I will tell you, 289 is not going to win. I'm pretty proud of that 289 for the measly amount of rain that this farm received. But that's all you got to do is use that field region report. Now, we're we're not asking it to be a perfect rectangle. We're not asking it to be a perfect square. You can just draw a circle. If your circle gets a little elliptical, that's okay. If your circle starts to look like a triangle, that's probably okay. If your circle starts to look like an amoeba, do you remember an amoeba from science class? So amoebas are kind of like this. If your field region report starts to look like that, that's what we call cheating. So that is not acceptable, but it doesn't have to be a perfect square. So while we're in climate here in my field and I'm sharing personal information on myself, like how crappy some of my corn was, I want to show you a couple things. And it's the time of year when we are evaluating hybrids. And people always wonder, what's the best way to evaluate hybrids? And, personally, I think Climate Field View is a very good way to evaluate hybrids. But you have to be careful what you're looking at. So I'm going to go to the harvest summary tab for this field. So here's my harvest summary tab for this field. I don't know how well you can see that. If I quit moving it around, you could probably see it better. Lists out every hybrid, lists out the acres, lists out the average yield and moisture, and ranks those hybrids. I don't like that report, to be quite honest with you, because it's misleading. So that report actually shows 4 hybrids because one of them's a typo. There is no 6269 in that field. That was a half an acre glitch. There's 52 acres of 6270 that average 254. There's 73 acres of 6289 that average 249. And there's 63 acres of 6391 that average 232. But where in the field were those hybrids planted? So we can look at that too. So I'm going to go back to split screen and I'm going to pull up my planting map. So if I get into planting, hybrid, okay. So there is the planting map. So the orange is the 6270, the purple is the 6289, and the green is the 6391. I also have a fungicide trial. There's a nasty glare on that. Apologize for that. There, that's better. I also have a fungicide trial embedded within the 6391 acre. So we'll talk about that here just in a minute as well. But the 6270 was at the north part of the field. It was also in the end rows. Now the end rows of this field were god awful. The south side's got some really nasty field border syndrome. The west side's got some nasty field border syndrome. The worst corn and the best corn in this field were 6270. If it wasn't for all the end rows acres included in the 6270, it probably would have won by 20 bushel, I would guess, the comparison of those 3 hybrids. But all those end row acres are mixed in. Also interesting, to go along with the field border syndrome, I'm going to pull up my soil map. Soil maps oftentimes don't correlate. That's in base layers if you wonder where your soil maps are. So I'm going to pull up soil type. So get this yield scale out of the way. So here's my soil map compared to my yield map. So that green strip at the bottom is something called sable silty clay loam. That is a really good but very heavy clay, very poorly drained soil that needs the heck tiled out of it. This farm needs tiled something awful. I don't own it, so I'm not going to tile it. The red is muscatine silt loam, which is also a pretty heavy clay soil. And the kind of the tan color is Osco silt loam, which is the best drained of the 3 soils. And if you look across the bottom of that field, the absolute worst part of the field, partly due to field border syndrome, partly due to the fact that really heavy soil had cracks in it big enough to lose a crescent wrench in the drought that this farm went through, really kind of correlates to yield somewhat on this farm as well. So one more thing we'll look at This is my fungicide trial. I don't have the application mapped in here, so you're just going to have to trust me that we're looking at a fungicide difference here. Harvest, yield. Okay. So, so if you remember the planting data, the bottom part of this field was all 6391. So the 6391 had the misfortune of being in the lowest yielding part of the field. But this strip of green, that green swath right through there, where it pretty suddenly goes from not very good to really good, also correlates with where we went up to the 12-ounce rate of Delaro Complete with our fungicide application at R1. So that was interesting. We've seen that in some other fields as well, that even under low disease pressure, we're seeing rate intensification on fungicides having a positive yield response, and just thought I would share that observation from this particular field. We did not see, in general, the huge responses to fungicide this year that we did last year in this part of the world. Now, we had a chance, I had a chance about 10 days ago to set through our data review where we share research results from all of our trials across the country. And there was an area of, I think it was in southeastern or southwestern, maybe just southern, can't remember, Minnesota, where was probably the hot spot for tar spot in this growing season in 22. And they were seeing, 60 and 80 bushel, responses to fungicide. They were seeing an additional 20 to 30 bushel response from a sequential R3 application of fungicide. So very similar to some of the results that we saw last year when we had heavy tar spot, heavy southern rust, heavy crown rot, lots of disease issues. This year we had anthracnose was pretty prevalent. We had tar spot, but it was late. We had less crown rot than we did the year before, and we had zero, didn't see any all year, southern rust. So very different disease spectrum and disease pressure in 22 versus 21. So not surprising that we didn't see some of the ridiculous responses to fungicide in 22 that we did in 21, but there are still positive responses. I am still getting reports from growers that are perplexed by why are the overlap areas on the edges of their fields where their neighbor is drifting on them when they spray their fungicide application. Why is that 20 or 30 bushel better again this year? And I think the rate intensification that we see in this fungicide trial with that full label rate, with those drift situations, you're getting a 2x rate or maybe more in some situations. And, we need to dig into that a little bit and see, we can't recommend 2x label rates, so it doesn't really matter. But it would be nice to understand what is it, even in the absence of disease, about hitting a plant with a really heavy load of fungicide that seems to be doing something, that plant likes. So just something we observe. So I think that ends our field view demo for this morning. Not trying to turn Ask the Agronomist into a field view commercial, but I am a big supporter and user of field view. I do think it is the best, the easiest way to evaluate product performance on your farm. It's a great record keeping tool. If you aren't using it, a lot of you probably have an account that you got signed up. Somebody signed you up back in the day. Maybe you use it, maybe you don't. If you've got an account, you're not using it, I'd say take the time to get your yield data and your planting data. If you don't get your planting data in, you can't do all the stuff that we just did because it doesn't know what to associate the yield data with. You can use it to just generate yield maps, but if you want to use it to the fullest extent, you need planting data and yield data in there. So
I would also say too, if you're doing some different management practices and trying some different things with your retail partner or whoever you're getting your product from, you're doing it yourself. There's a big opportunity there to look at different treatments from not only planting of different hybrids, but obviously application of multiple different things, fertilizer, other starters, so on and so forth.
You can map virtually anything in climate now. Sometimes you have to, maybe create I don't know, name it in a way that you understand what it is. But you could map different nitrogen rates. You could map different nitrogen timings. You could map different nitrogen products. You can map different fungicide applications. It's a little easier to map sometimes if it was a ground application versus an aerial application. But depending on what software the aerial applicator is using, it might be compatible as well. But there's a lot of stuff that you can get, imported into Climate. And if you get it in there the right way, when you run that yield report, it'll break it out for you by those different treatments. And Adam's right. It's the easiest way to turn your farm into a test plot if that's anything you've ever wanted to do. Okay, so I'm going to get back on my list of things here. So we talked about Yield Chaser enrollment. We talked about the link to upload. So if you get your data entered into the contest and you get entered into the contest, we're going to have a banquet on February 2nd, what day of the week is February 2nd, Adam? Do you know? I haven't looked that up. But while Adam's looking for that, Thursday. So Thursday, February 2nd. I can't tell you what time it starts. I think there's a luncheon involved with that. We're going to have a special guest speaker, Dr. Fred Below. So those of you that are familiar with Dr. Below's work and have ever seen him speak, extremely entertaining and great speaker, wealth of knowledge, former colleague of Adam's, former teacher of mine, does a lot of work with us on the research side of things, and great speaker. So we're very proud to have Dr. Below to join us at the February 2nd, Thursday, Yield Chaser Banquet. So that would be another reason to get into the contest in addition to showing off your good yields. By the way, I didn't mention, should have mentioned this, corn and soybeans, either one. It's not just a corn contest, could be either or. And there's prizes for that too. So get enrolled in the contest. Okay. Did my regional report demo. We talked a little bit about fungicide performance. We talked a little bit about hybrid evaluations. We talked about our Ask the Agronomist giveaway. Okay, so I think I've got one more agronomic topic, and then maybe we'll have some questions. If not, we'll announce our guest speaker for our last episode, and we might wrap up a little early here today, which is rare for me. But anyway, I still get questions from people who are frustrated with their soybean yields. There were some small pockets where soybeans were really good, 80s and 90 bushel field averages, but I would say the vast majority of the state did not raise the soybean crop this year that they did last year. In some cases, they were 5 or 10 bushels off of last year. In some cases, they might have been 15 or 20 bushels off of last year. On my farm, beans in the mid 70s were very good, and it was down from there. And when I look at my rainfall totals for the second half of July and the month of August, I'm damn thankful that I had some beans that made 75, because I got enough rain for 60 bushel beans, not 75. So I feel pretty fortunate that with the little amount of rain that we had, especially in the second half of July and the month of August, that we were able to achieve the soybean yields that we did. But, from some areas weren't able to plant early. That also impacted us. We had one field that got planted in April, and it was late April, and then went through hell after that. Most of our beans were planted in mid-May, so there were a lot. Some areas didn't really have a good April window for soybean planting. A lot of areas got too dry in late July and August. We had disease issues. We have disease issues every year, but I would say there was more disease issues in soybeans in 22 than there was in 21. But I think that the overall, most consistent factor that I see, I know my colleague Chris Carlisle has his research plot site at Auburn. He had beans at Auburn going over 100 bushel, and he had, I think he told me they had 7 inches of rain in July at Auburn and about 5 in August. So there was some areas in the state that were very, very, very plentiful with their July and August rainfall, and for the most part, that's where the best beans were. Not always, but there was certainly a correlation there. But planting date, soil type, variety, weather, all those things, make an impact. And I'll give another plug for FieldView. You can within FieldView, and I could show you how to do it if you aren't tired of looking at me holding up my iPad in front of the camera. You can go into individual field historic weather and look at how much rain did you get each month, when did it fall, what was the intensity of that rainfall. And when I do that on a field by field basis, I'd say about 80% of the time I can correlate soybean yield to weather. Not always, but there's a pretty good correlation there. So if you haven't taken the time to do that, I'd say it's worthwhile. And that historical data, so that data that's in climate within FieldView, when you go look at that historical weather data, that is going to be slightly different than the text you get on your phone the day after it rains. So that immediate 24-hour weather is a best estimate that we can get to you that quickly of what the rainfall was. 72 hours after the rainfall event, when we've had time to analyze the data more and look at weather station data and correlate some things, they refine that data. And so if you watch careful, the number that you see on your text on your phone is not necessarily going to be identical to the final number for what that rainfall event was on that particular day. So if you think, personally, I think the amounts are pretty damn close when I get them on my phone, considering the fact that, in 12 hours, you've got that data. That's close enough for me. But we do refine that. And so that data gets even more accurate. It's still not perfect. It's never going to match your rain gauge. And I'll irritate some people when I say this, but the primary reason it won't match your rain gauge is because the rain gauge is pretty damn inaccurate too, because the rain gauge is measuring a spot that big. And you know how variable rainfall patterns are. What FieldView is doing is trying to give you an average for the field. So it's not going to match the rain gauge that's that big, because if the rain gauge is accurate, it's only accurate in that spot. It's not accurate for over here. So don't worry about it if it doesn't match your rain gauge. You can argue over which one's more, or I won't say more accurate, but less inaccurate, the rain gauge or the Doppler radar. But I'm going to put my money on the Doppler radar, which averaged across the whole field, representing what that farm actually got, than the rain gauge that's behind your house under the tree. So we'll let that go for today. Did we have a question come in? I see my friend Tom's name there.
Yep, just popped up. Tom says, I got a landlord who feels that soybean cyst nematode.
I bet I know that landlord.
We don't check fields like we used to. Is the present soybean resistant diminishing?
So that's good question, Tom. I'm pretty sure I have lots of lengthy conversations with the landlord you're referring to. Good dude. I would say they're
Tom says yes, you know.
I would say that without a doubt, the source of cyst resistance that is used in virtually every commercial soybean variety you would buy, that has been used in virtually every commercial soybean variety for, 30 years, Adam, over 20, I'm sure.
Yeah,
we've used the heck out of what we call PI 88788. That is the plant introduction. That's what PI stands for. So that is the historical ancestral soybean line that is the source for cyst resistance in almost all the commercial varieties you will buy. There are other sources of cyst resistance, and companies have tried to varying degrees of success utilize other sources of resistance, and other sources of resistance typically give you stronger cyst protection. There seems to be a yield penalty associated with some of those other sources so that you get better cyst resistance, but lower yield potential. And in some really extreme situations, especially on some of our sandy soils, where cyst counts can be so high that raising good beans is impossible, you might be better off to pick a Peking source of resistance or a Hartwig source of resistance that does have better cyst protection, and lower yield potential, because on those really bad farms, your number one yield limiting factor might be cyst nematode. I don't see, when we tried to launch NemaStrike a few years ago, we did a whole bunch of soybean cyst nematode sampling. And frankly, we were shocked at how low some of the cyst numbers we got were and how small the yield advantage we were seeing to our great nematicide product was. And both of those were indicating that, maybe cyst pressure wasn't, skyrocketing and getting out of hand. Elevo is a good nematicide that we sell on seed, and we have people that have switched away from Elevo because they don't like some of the crop response issues from Elevo to products that are not good nematicides, and in some cases they don't necessarily feel that they've seen a big difference in performance. So we've got all this anecdotal data that says that maybe cyst is not a big factor in soybean yields, but I'm sure it is a factor. Is it 2 bushel? Is it 5 bushel? Is it 10 bushel? Is it 20 bushel? That's going to depend on the field. You're right. We don't do a lot of cyst testing as a general rule anymore. The reason for that is we're already all planting cyst beans. I mean, if we have an excellent non-cyst variety, in the breeding program, we're probably not going to commercialize it in an Asgrow bag, because all anybody wants to plant are cyst beans. And even though PI 88788 is a little weak in its cyst resistance, nobody really wants to plant a non-cyst bean. So there really isn't a market for non-cyst beans. And since there's not a market for non-cyst beans, and the better sources of cyst resistance have not been successful being broadly adapted because of lack of yield, it seems like a little bit of a moot point to do a lot of testing. So I think that's why people aren't testing as much. If you test, you're going to find cyst nematodes. The other challenge with testing is, what threshold do you use to determine how big a problem do I have? There is no industry consensus at all on what the proper threshold for cyst nematode is. And you'll pick up one lab's chart that says you've got high pressure. The next lab you look at would call that medium or low pressure. It also depends on, are you looking at eggs? Are you looking at nematodes? What are you sampling for? How did you sample? What time of year did you sample? So the sampling is not easy. The sampling is not cheap. The sampling is highly variable. The thresholds are highly variable. And in the end, after you go to all that trouble, you're probably going to plant the same cyst bean you've been planting. So I don't, I know I'm supposed to say we need to be testing for cyst nematode. You need to know what your population is. You need to know what you're dealing with. But there are limited actions you can take as a result of all that sampling and testing that you do. And so I get why people don't bother doing it. And until we find, until cysts get worse, or until we find a source of resistance that's better and allows us to breed high yielding soybeans, we're probably going to keep doing what we've been doing, which is what we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years. So I don't know if there's any follow-up questions or not from that, Adam, but that would be my thoughts.
Nope, no follow-up questions at the moment.
So appreciate the question, Tom. Another contest entry for you, and you already had several. So if you win that stove, I'll come over and stand around it with you and look cool, because I'm standing in front of that stove. So anyway, I think that wraps up everything that I wanted to touch on. Another question?
Yeah, we have a question coming in from Noah. He says, how does one extra year of corn on corn impact soybean cyst nematode? Great
question. So soybean cyst nematode have a pretty narrow host range. There are some winter annual weeds, so like chickweed, for example, or is it henbit? I think it's henbit actually, is a alternate host for soybean cyst nematode. So letting your fields turn purple in the spring with that beautiful henbit out there, and using henbit as a cover crop is also benefiting your cyst nematode population in your field. So be aware of that. things like cereal rye and some of the other, more, I'll say, beneficial cover crops have actually been shown to suppress cyst populations. Another thing that will suppress cyst populations is rotating, lengthening out your soybean rotation. So I can't necessarily give you a number, is it a 25% reduction? Is it a 50% reduction? I think there are people who feel they have some rules of thumb. Obviously, every year that field is out of soybeans, you are going to be diminishing that soybean cyst nematode population. Now, you're not going to eliminate it, but you do reduce it. And that is one of the likely reasons that soybeans following multiple years of corn seem to have a positive yield response to that multiple years of corn is we have suppressed that cyst nematode population. Now, you got to be a little bit careful, how long you go with the continuous corn, because, there are cyst nematode is one species of nematode that affects soybeans. There are a whole, myriad of species of nematodes, a lot of which impact corn. So things like stunt, needle, dagger. There's a nematode called Lance. I'm not particularly fond of being named after a nematode, but anyway, there are a lot of other species of nematode which get worse than continuous corn. So there are some acres. It tends to be in my territory. It tends to be in the sands of Mason, Cass, Tazewell County. There are some fields that have very high levels of multiple different species of nematode. So if you rotate to corn for 2 or 3 years to suppress your cyst population, you're going to elevate your population of parasitic corn nematodes. So we have to manage that. But there is absolutely a benefit to 2 or 3 or 4 years of corn for suppressing your soybean cyst nematode population. So that would be one effective strategy. If you do test for soybean cyst, you've got fields that you feel are higher than other fields. You're trying to do some corn on corn. You're trying to figure out where to do your corn on corn. If your fields with higher cyst nematode counts are good candidates to be corn on corn fields, and you want to do some corn on corn, be a perfect match there to try to do your corn on corn on your fields that have highest cyst populations. Anything else come in, Adam?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So our guest host, guest speaker announcement. So Adam and I have.
Tom just came.
All right.
Says, did not know Henbeck could be a host. Is a nematicide enough to control pressure in a field like that?
I mean, question, and you probably all heard Adam ask the question, so I won't repeat it. But I mean, I would say none of the nematicide products are 100% effective. Elevo is probably the best one that we have on the market today, in my opinion. It is a very effective nematicide. One thing that I've learned, talking with legacy Bayer folks that developed Elevo, they were developing it as a nematicide, and then made the somewhat happy accidental discovery that it was pretty effective at suppressing sudden death syndrome as well. So it got launched as an SDS treatment, but it was actually first being developed as a nematicide seed treatment. And so it is a very effective nematicide. But that being said, if you get an elevated population and you're using a control measure that gives you 70% control, do you want to have 70% control of a low number or 70% control of a high number? I don't think I would necessarily rely on a nematicide to completely fix that problem. I would probably be looking at a fall burn down to address the weed issue, and then maybe combine that with a nematicide and attack that from both directions. And I call out henbit because it's the one I could remember. There are other species.
I was going to say there's several.
That's not the only one. Did you look that up?
Yeah, birchwood, trefoil, chickweed.
Okay, so chickweed is as well. So both. I mean, if you want to get aggressive about controlling cysts, two of the most common alternate hosts for cysts are growing in every acre of no-till soybeans in the state of Illinois. So that might be a good reason to be a little more interested in a fall burn down. Any other species you noted or you recognize, Adam?
For some cover crop situations, vetch is actually on here.
Okay.
You got the winged pigweed, which isn't really an issue around here. Purslane, pokeweed, but those wouldn't be quite as big.
Yeah. So as far as your big acre species, it would be soybeans, henbit, and chickweed. Are the three that I hear on that list.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've been teasing this announcement for the whole episode here, and Adam and I have both talked about this happening for a long time, and if there is one person that I really wanted to have as a guest on Ask the Agronomist, it would be this individual, and I'm going to tease our colleague Jennifer Elliott. Jennifer has almost given me a complex because Jennifer is so insistent that we need people with me on Ask the Agronomist. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think there's a need for anybody else. I think just me is great. But Jennifer wants somebody to help carry me. So we've got the ultimate helper coming on this special episode, December 16th, Friday at 8:00. Reason we're going to Champaign-Urbana or Urbana-Champaign, either one, is so Dr. Fred Below can co-host with me on Ask the Agronomist. So this will be perfect. Fred is amazing, and you won't need Lance on that episode of Ask the Agronomist because we got Dr. Below there. So we may go long. I don't really think Dr. Below and I, and Adam knows Dr. Below better than I do. I don't think there's any chance in hell that with the three of us in one room, we'll be done in an hour. But I hope it's a good time. I know it'll be a good time for Adam and I. I really appreciate Dr. Below for agreeing to help us. He's actually going to be speaking in South Dakota Wednesday that week and was supposed to get back to Champaign at like 9:00 Wednesday night. He was willing to be with us Thursday morning at 7:30 in Champaign, but he didn't trust the airlines to come through for him flying out of the Dakotas in December. Good chance of a delay, good chance he wouldn't get back in time. And he was just afraid that, guys, if Adam and I drive all the way to Champaign and Dr. Below's stranded in South Dakota, that would suck. So that's why we're going to reschedule and move it to Friday. But that'll be awesome. That'll be our season ending episode. We'll give away that fancy yuppie stove that we're giving away, and we'll have Dr. Below with us, and Adam will be there, and it'd be just like getting the band back together. So really looking forward to that, and hope you can all join us. We will be hyping the hell out of that last season ending episode for the next 2 weeks. I want to see the biggest live audience we've ever had, and you can all chat in your questions for Dr. Below on that episode on Friday, December 16th. So thank you much for being here. Appreciate all the great questions today. So you guys are smart, getting in a few extra entries for that fancy stove we're giving away. And I don't know why it's called a stove, by the way, because for me, stoves are to cook food on. This is like a fancy fire pit kind of stove. I guess you could roast a hot dog on the open fire there. But when I think of stoves, I think of something with a frying pan on it with some really good fried chicken or some gravy or something going is what I think of a stove. But anyway, we'll be back with you in 15 days, live from Champaign with Dr. Below, and everybody stay safe, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.